everyone. Hi Tim. Hi Kun Andrew.
Hey, consider Pawn.
Consider Pawn. Hi Andrew.
Hey,
Sorry,
Tim.
little bit late. Today we will talk about transformation, talk about integrate planning. So this is a fourth episode already. What we need to talk today about what is manufacturing planning and control for better decision and strategic advantage. Then second one we will talk about how system work together and for better outcome. The third one what about manufacturing control technical and success story, right? Tim is can we wrap up what we talked in previous episode about integrate planning? What we talked before.
Yeah. One of the most exciting developments that's happening in the integration space, and that Industry 4.0 is highlighting. It didn't start with Industry 4.0, but it's been a really reminder to many businesses is that when we're planning to be able to recalibrate and understand at any time in the day or night or weekend where my factory is up to, where my resources up to, where my material is up to, where my trucks are.
Right.
We're at an age and a connectivity maturity where it's reality to be able to get at the push of a button to get a recalibrated plan or a recalibrated snapshot of where I'm up to. And that's it for people that don't work in planning, it might seem a little bit odd that this is important. But for those of us who work in planning a lot, the difference between a factory where you issue a plan and you find out at the end of the day or next week or the end of the weekend that, you know, some of the factory was shut down, some lines didn't run because material didn't show up and there was some absenteeism. And in those cases, the planner comes in on Monday morning and they spend the first few hours trying to get all this information to figure out where they are. In an integrated planning, immediately we know where we are because we have the production counts that tell us whether, and we track them against what we're actually scheduling. So we see, are we on track? Are we ahead of schedule? Are we behind schedule? So that ability to recalibrate almost instantly allows us to make very fast and informed decisions about if there's a change in demand or if a customer has returned some product with a quality issue, to know how quickly you can respond or how you can respond. We can make those decisions almost instantly because we can recalibrate our plan with the new information. And that's an exciting evolution that wasn't available 20 years ago. And early adopters of production reporting systems had the information, but it wasn't talking to their planning systems. And we're now at a stage where a few planning systems like Profit have seen the need for getting that information about deliveries and about production reporting and integrating that back into the planning cycle so you can quickly reassess where you are and also use that same information to recalibrate your planning rates and lead to vendors and so on. So it's a very exciting time. These little nuances of getting live data and near live data is just allowing us to spend much more time in shaping and planning, making better decisions rather than just collating data and trying to figure out where we've been. So.
Okay. Tim is when we look at this, I think it's previous what we talk about demand side and supply side. For today is for manufacturing planning and control. What concern about strategic planning for manufacturing execution? Because it's what is strategic for manufacturing execution and planning? Because it's many is company try to do the last one for manufacturing, how they produce, how they deliver it to the warehouse. So what is main strategy to do this?
So now what we believe is that you want to have a very clear delineation between where your ERP system is sitting, and it's like the source of truth. But we see very, very sensible to have good data acquisition systems on your shop floor and in your warehouse, so we can immediately get information into the ERP, so we know material was received, not at the end of the next day when someone's filled out paper, handed it to data entry clerk, not that anymore. We want to know data's going straight in from a barcode scanner, so we know, okay, product has been received, it's on the dock or it's been put away, or even better, the material is now picked, ready to go to the machine, and the next job on the line, we have material staged, ready to go to the machine, and the people are there, tooling is there, and job is ready, for example, 2 hours before the job is expected to run, it's all material already sitting there. And this information flow is now enabled, and really good high-performing companies are making sure that all of their systems are integrated, but not trying to do it. It's very, very hard to do it all in your ERP system, but the ERP system should receive the data. You may well have a different system to collect the data of production and quality and so on, and have dashboards showing your progress in the shop floor. You have different systems like ours for doing the planning and making the decisions about what to do next and how to satisfy your customers. But having these integrated is really, really powerful, but also requires the management to have that vision, to see the opportunity of having this information flow quickly, so that the minute that there's a problem, we can respond, or the minute there's an opportunity, we can capitalize on it. And it's exciting, but it's interesting that technology is no longer the barrier, but our expectations are the barrier, that we're still starting to see more and more companies are realizing the power of this, but there's not so many people doing it really well, but it's no longer a barrier of technology, which is exciting. So
right.
a fair ground.
Because it's most of them, when planning, they fix the plan for master production schedule. So MPS, that is very important for planning side and production side. What do you think is how MPS can help manufacturing to have is a good plan in operation?
Yeah, I really like that question, Siddhapon. We see businesses that spend a lot of time on their sequences can sometimes forget about master scheduling, and a really good master scheduling, it has the ability to chunk the work. The way I like to think about it is, you have your forecast that may have monthly or weekly breakdowns of your requirements.
Right.
Sequencing and scheduling is very, very short. Master scheduling is that piece in between, where we're looking further afield and we're seeing what's happening this month, the next month, and the month after, and then we're breaking it into weekly buckets. And the benefit of this, breaking it into weekly buckets, we talk about, you're trying to figure out how much of each product I'm going to make each week.
Right.
And then also how much material am I going to purchase, and what I'm going to replenish to each week. And this you get into a cadence of breaking down your overall demand into weekly buckets. And the reason why this is so important, and yet sometimes missed, is when you get into this cadence and you do this, you have the opportunity of smoothing out things, like sometimes we have more work than we can do, and the next week there's no work. Sometimes we have more crew and we don't know what to do with them, and the next week we have people have the flu or have to stay at home and there's not enough crew. Your master scheduling is how sometimes you can get material, sometimes you can't. Your master scheduling is very, very powerful way of making sure that you're looking ahead to see these peaks and troughs, and you're using your stocked items or your B class and C class customers to smooth out your demand and smooth out what you can make, and make sure you're keeping your primary customers fed, your lines balanced, and working on the stuff that's needed. But you get a real opportunity to smooth the peaks and troughs of volatility of manufacture. And it's a powerful, powerful thing. The reason why many businesses have not lost kind of almost this piece of master scheduling is many businesses buy an ERP system, and it's very important to them to have an MRP engine. And people are mistaking an MRP engine for master scheduling.
Right.
And it's an approximation, but we use the term it's just too late, not just in time, but it's too late. It's not constraint aware. So when you rely on your MRP from your ERP system, your MRP will tell you exactly how much of each product you need and the latest date that you can make it. And that's the default setup. And yes, purists will tell you can get around that, and you can, but it's cumbersome for many organisations. And so the MRP is mistaken for MPS, but it's not the same. MRP is an explosion of your material bomb to tell you how much. When you look at an MPS lens, it's taking all of that MRP information and then overlaying that with your constraints, and then working through the puzzle of what can I make more of to fill out that capacity, and if I don't have enough material or capacity, what can I make less of but still keep everyone satisfied? I may have to dip into my safety stock. And that trading is done beautifully at the master scheduling level. When businesses try and do that as a sequencing task, it's too much to expect the planners to sequence to minimize cost of manufacture and keep all the lines running in the short term, like the next couple of days, while worrying about how we're going to deal with next week, the week after, and the week after that. So the best businesses do capacity planning monthly. They do a weekly breakdown into their master scheduling over the rolling maybe 13 weeks. And then they pass that to the sequencers who minimize the cost of manufacture and keep the lines running and the nuances within the factory. But that, if it's already been master scheduled, we know everything that we're trying to achieve is achievable in the weekly buckets, and now it's about figuring out when exactly in the week we're going to do it once we get to sequencing. And that cadence it takes the noise and the panic out of the business. It's a very, very powerful piece.
Right. Could Andrew is in up is when is they have implement ERP. In ERP that includes MRP module. So when they have MRP module already, some organization they said, oh, we already have MRP. We don't need MPS anymore. So what do you think is what different from MRP and MPS benefit?
So look, I think the biggest thing is Tim started to allude to it as well, is the biggest difference is you with MPS you're so well aligned that the panic comes out of it. So you actually see in far more granularity what you need to do, but also if things do go wrong, you're actually then focused on a minimal amount of things. So you're now not trying to put out 10 fires, you're trying to put out 3. Or you're having very good direct conversations with the sales group, because you might be over delivering on manufacturing because of 1, 2, or 3 has gone wrong, or you might be under delivering. But at least you're having the immediate conversation with 1 or 2 very specific areas of your business to either go out and sell more or start apologizing to customers early. So, or to start actually, being ready to who to disappoint and who not to disappoint. I think the other important point in here is, MRP is not a flow through product. It doesn't go from the too far down the value chain. So it's really only looking at enough to keep you up and running from a totals point of view, not from the scheduling point of view. And that's where things start to go really wrong, right? So if you need to increase capacity, MRP is not going to help you with figuring out how to increase your capacity or to do better scheduling. So it's a great tool. It's a really good tool. But in blessed isolation, it just doesn't, it needs the other parts to go with it in order to be as effective as it can be for the business.
Right. Okay. That is good to know about that. And also, Tim, is when we have some organization, they have a peak period in the season now. What is MRP and MPS can work together with rough cut capacity planner, because some organization they cannot supply. They already have full capacity. How is work together with RCCP?
Yeah, and commonly we see the businesses that have very big seasonality are some of the most they get some of the biggest benefits out of having an integrated capacity planning into MPS into scheduling. And effectively what you're doing in your capacity planning with your latest forecast or forecasts, you run that through your capacity planning, and what you're looking for is, when do we need to start pre-building? Normally, pre-building comes with two costs. Often it comes with the cost of extra labor, on which it will be contract labor and maybe on overtime rates or higher rates because they're not permanent. And as we turn that capacity on, we're likely also building the product early. So you have warehousing costs, risk of damage, and all the other ancillary costs that come with making product early. So, a good example is if you're anything to do with fruit, picking fruit, often you'll see massive, abundant availability of fruit in peak season, and then it drops off in some areas in the world, not so much around the equator, but when you get away from the equator, you can see these massive spikes in productivity of fruit farms and so on. And if you're providing the packaging, or if you're providing the boxes, or if you're providing the transportation, or any of these things, you've got this enormous capacity demand in a short period of time. And if you miss it, the fruit rots. So you don't have a choice. You have to be available. And what we see in the supporting industries is they're always looking and checking in with the farms. In Australia, for example, many of the fresh fruit and produce starts in December and maybe through till March. You get these peak seasons on different fruits. The canneries that make the cans that get filled when the harvest happens, they're starting to fill somewhere between July and September, depending on the season. So they've got this long range forecast. They've got known kind of peak periods and seasonality, but they've got this long range forecast, and they're always trying to make sure you've got steel on the water. And the steel is 80% of the cost of the can. And you're trying to predict what tin plates are going to happen and so on. And you run that after you've got your demand and your best forecast or estimates of high and low seasonality based on what we think is happening with the weather and the season and the fruit. We then go and run that through our capacity plan to see, of the inventory that we've got, where we're going to make the product, where we're going to store it, what metal do we need on the ocean, what crews are we planning for, and again, like in the MPS example that Andrew was just talking about, we take the stress out of this because we're looking ahead. Now we're making decisions with our clients. We're making decisions. Are we going to start pre-building in September or October or November? Bearing in mind, there's no exact science here about the forecast. It's still a forecast, and you can get a hailstorm at the last minute that blows out the crop of peaches, or you may find that you're planning on beetroots coming out of the ground and now we're going to fit into a 375ml can, and they're huge, and you've got to fit them into a different size can. All of these variabilities, we still have to buffer for those and protect for those, which we do in the capacity planning process. But we do it by being tactical about, what can we rely upon, what can we build early and know that will not go to waste, and wait and leave the volatile choices as close to reality as possible, so that we're not left holding a whole lot of really big cans that we won't use till next year. This process of the SOP process is just a wonderful step. And after you've built that seasonality plan and inventory plan, we then pass that into our MPS. And this is a good example of where MRP is not sufficient. We still have to explode. The MRP still takes our planned manufacture and explodes it out into metals. But what MRP finds very, very hard to do is, if we decide, I'm going to make more and more and more of this product, I want to go from my normal 20 days coverage of my products during leading up to peak season. I want to get to 70 days cover. You don't have parameters to allow you to do that in an MRP system. So it's an enormous amount of manual work, or you want to go to tools that are designed for it, like MPS tools. So in Rough Cut, we make decisions about how much we're going to make or how many days forward we're going to build it. But we're typically doing that at a group level. And then when we get to MPS, we're now starting to say, well, okay, we're a little bit closer now. In the next 3 months, we're looking at weekly buckets of what individual SKUs are we going to make. And we're kind of finessing and refining those rough cut decisions. They flow down in an integrated way into our MPS. So as we're making a SKU level decisions from bottom up, making sure we're not going to run anyone out, we're not going to make too much of any product, we're making sure we're true to those decisions that we made and agreed to in the rough cut. So for us, we track that, and it's one of those things that it's extremely hard to do that in the ERP system. I've never seen it done well. we've got particular tools that are built to track that. So while you're planning, you can see, does this plan, is it in all its detail, are we still on track from our macro direction that we agreed in rough cut?
Right. I try to imagine if I like planning manager, if don't have to like this, I will do on Excel. How efficient on Excel? I think really headache. And Andrew, what do you think, if you can suggest me how I can implement, because it's a start first step from Excel spreadsheet that I calculate by myself. Maybe it's 1 or 2 year I use this tool. Then we need to implement what we should start with the planning scheduling tool, MPS, rough cut capacity planning. How step up one by one, or we can integrate at all since beginning?
Look, it's a bit of a loaded question because I think it very much depends on the business.
Right.
It depends on complexity, and I think it's also, it's very dependent on the need for change and how much you're going to get out of it. So, if you're looking at going from super complex in a super complex environment, you're really looking at starting with something that's going to smooth things out as quickly as possible, and it potentially isn't everything at once. A lot of the time they need to be they can only be a little bit sequential for no other reason than the business just can't handle doing all of those things at once. So for me, it's kind of depending on the business. It's taking each of the attributes where you're going to see the most benefit immediately. And it might not be that you go for the ROI benefit immediately. It might be that you're actually going for less chaos in there. I think you're probably going to get some savings with less chaos anyway. But
right.
For me, it's kind of, if you're looking at the fruit businesses like Tim's talking about, right? Some of those long-term plans are fantastic right up until the time. I have a client who they pineapples, right? And you don't quite know what you're going to get until they hit the factory, because you got to float them, then they do sizing, and then you've got to make a choice, because the big ones tend to go to Japan because Japan like big and fresh. Local market prefer a little bit smaller. So you're really, right up until the time that you're there, you can do all the planning you like, but it will change on the day depending on what the harvest looks like. So for them, getting that long-term planning just about right is okay. But when they can make adjustments quickly as it comes in. So, I think the difference in the modules, or the difference in the areas, is really dependent on the business that you run. For me, I think something like ePlanner always gives you the smoothest start, or rough cut, because it allows you just to, it is what it says. Tim will be able to talk to much more detail on this, but if enough is good enough, rather than being perfect. So for me, I think that's where businesses need to assess. And again, I always stress this, it's the capacity for change. Too many businesses dive in with both feet and it's too much. Other businesses overthink it and take too long. There's a balance to be had.
If I can, I love that term about not being perfect. We have a saying that we like to use: be prolific, not perfect. You're better off to be in a cycle, and particularly with capacity planning, get in a cycle, get everyone talking and sharing and looking at the constraints and making their best decision with the information available. That is far more powerful. We talked about this the other day about getting everyone involved in the forecasting, also getting everyone involved that needs to be involved in the capacity planning and the rough cut and the SOP process is more powerful than the actual decisions that you make. Having everyone working to one set of decisions, to me, even if it's not quite right, it's like tacking when you're sailing. You've got to be going fast and close to the right direction, having to change course. than not starting because you're not sure exactly what direction the wind's going. It's like you've got to be out there and got to be moving. And so be prolific, get into the habit quickly, and you'll refine as you go.
Right. Tim is what as I know before about OEE. Normally, OEE when is manufacturing, they have is real time equipment. They can improve OEE about 10 or 20%.
Yep.
Then if they have is a MRP and planning and scheduling tool, they can increase more OEE also maybe 5 or 10%. Is exactly right when we have tool like that.
Yeah, absolutely. The other interesting thing about the OEE and that 10 to 20% you're talking about, if you just use hardcore good engineering and process improvement practices, you'll find your major downtimes and you'll ratchet them out of the process. But that's hard and intense work. The reason why I started Profit, I used to be in process improvement, and I love it. I love making factories run better, machines run better, and solving problems. But I also realized it didn't matter how much we work on the machines themselves and on the business processes. If you have your machines are running like a Formula One, but you can't get fuel to it, or in the case of a machine, you can't get the material, or you don't have people, or you're not making the right product, it doesn't matter that the machine can run well. You still don't run efficiently. However, if you have planning right, it already knows what sequence the machines run well, how to minimize the changeovers, not just by SMED programs and really hard engineering improvement, but by knowing what is this machine good at and how does it like to see the work arranged. If you're already planning for that, you get at least 10 percentage points of OEE improvement. It's extraordinary, and this is very industry dependent, but it's very, very rare that you get machines that have no setup. Unless that machine has been dedicated, that those lines just don't change. Most processes that have some flexibility have preferences on the way to work, and your people have preferences, and the supporting processes have preferences. Once we know those, we can sequence the work that goes to the machines and make sure that everything's pre-staged, so the machines just keep running, and they run really, really well. And it requires very little engineering, very little process improvement, very little thought process after the planning is set up. So the reason why I set up Profit is there's so much opportunity in most businesses that we can get at to make the factories run faster and better and with less trouble, just by being aware of how the business is now. And it's an extraordinary opportunity that is almost always missed until we start working with them and show them. But yeah, at least 10 percentage points of OEE. And we've seen massive improvements. I've seen 20 and 30, 2 or 3 times the OEE increase. In businesses where it's running poorly, machines might be running at 30% OEE. And we've been able to get them up to 80 or 90% by seeing where the constraints are in the process and operating that. And I don't care how good you are down on the machine, if the supply chain is stopping the lines, there's only so much you can do in the factory. You've actually got to get into the process that's feeding the work to the factory. So yeah, anyway, that's you can see I'm excited about it. But yes, we see very, very big improvements in any process that requires or is influenced by the products that are running on those processes.
Right. Because most of manufacturing, if it's from planning side, they have is a very good planning and scheduling can improve productivity on manufacturing shop floor. So that is improve its productivity. It means OE will better and better. That is improve its customer satisfaction and delivery also. Andrew, when we talk about is demand planning, supply planning, and now we talk about manufacturing planning and control. So if third part integrate together, how is improve in sales and operation planning perspective, or what the outcome when we have is a sales and operation meeting?
Yeah, look, and I think the last point you were making about OEE is something where you can tell that these things are starting to come together, right? So if you think about that OEE calculation, availability times performance times quality, you can plan all you like, and if you don't talk to the guy who knows exactly how the machine behaves, what gets the best out of the machine, you're not going to get the best quality, or you're not going to get the best performance. And so again, that S&OP is absolutely vital, because again, it's not just sales leading operations, and it's not, and operations is bigger than just OP, as in ops.
Right.
So, you know, there's many more things to think about, and I think that's where that's where you see, and what we struggle with a lot in this part of the world is, you know, the equipment isn't always the best. You know, a lot of companies really hold off on making that investment because they are big investments. It's just a little bit like, just get that little bit more, just get that little bit more, get that little bit more. And then everyone starts talking about, you know, the maintenance and predictive maintenance. And it's, you know, so at some point someone needs to make that call of the assets just need to be retired. But I think when you get that good operations S&OP, you're actually putting the weightage in for a very important part of the business. You know, these are, you know, that part of operations is like having children. You know, you've really got to know how to caress them and you know, advise and get them through a hard day, and make sure that they come out at the end with some quality. So I think that's, you know, for me, that's when you're seeing really good S&OP is when people can understand you may need to back something off, but it does mean that you're actually gonna, you will hit your numbers. It probably won't look like what you want it to look like as you go through the planning process, but you should get the result you want at the end. Because again, I've seen far too many times where businesses have just pushed production into the dirt and said, run the machines, run the machines, run the machines.
Right.
And guess what? So at about 1 o'clock in the morning, the machines go down, you know, and you're calling, you know, and you're getting overtime for maintenance coming in. You don't have the right parts.
Yeah, you're trying to get out of Germany.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, putting on a nut and a bolt from Germany to come out to Thailand gets a little bit expensive. So, you know, and I think that for me is kind of where you start seeing the rubber really hit the road, and that's efficiency within business. You know, that's a team working. Then, you know, I think we made the analogy a few weeks ago of, you know, the guys coming out to change the tires on a Formula One car. You know, if you look at the evolution of changing tires on Formula One cars, usually the driver would get out and do it himself. Now we've got about 15 blokes running around doing 4 tires at once. So, you know, that for me is when businesses start to operate well.
Right. What I try to imagine and observe operation that can do when they have is a manufacturing production. They look at the plan short period, maybe in six weeks or 3 months. That is more accurate, can improve its productivity. And also when we look back for sales and operation planning, maybe 3 months or 1 year. So if they have is a very accurate plan that can improve together. So I think this is a tool can help people on each department can work together. For example, is planning. They have planning and scheduling tool that very useful to them and very is real time to make better decision that can improve, and they can feedback to sales side to ensure that is forecast is more accurate. And also what they worry about, if forecast more accurate, how they have manufacturing more accurate also. So when it's integrate together, I think this is a powerful benefit in organization to work together. Then I think is a Tim, what do you think? What a KPI, that common KPI can share for organization when they have tool like this to work together?
We'd expect to see, and we want to see in many businesses, we want to see, at very least, we want to see an improvement in the in our servicing our customers. So often that would be a servicing from stock or a delivery in full and on time metric. And ultimately, what we really want to see also beyond that is we'd expect over time, we'd expect that to increase total revenue. Because if you servicing your customers well, you'll get more of their business, and sooner or later you'll get their competitors' business. So because it's a competitive advantage to have the right stock when you need it. So that's the kind of the lead or the front end of the business indicators. Some of the indicators where I get excited but are still very common are seeing the inventory not just in dollars but also in days cover. Because the dollar inventory, we work with many companies where they might have $100 million or more of inventory, but that's a big number. But maybe it's 10 days stock, in which case that's not a big number unless they're fresh milk. Then they've got too much stock. For many businesses, it's actually understanding their stock, their raw material, their WIP and their finished goods in terms of days cover is fascinating and really illuminating for their businesses. It allows you to really see, beyond the dollars tells you if it's a big opportunity or not, but the days cover tells you if they're in control or covering for a lot of sins or going to really struggle to meet their customer demand. And so that's an area, just getting the business to think about what should my raw material be. If I have a raw material vendor who can supply to me on a couple of days' notice and they're local and I don't have long shipping lead times, if I've got 60 days of raw material and my primary material is of high cost, I'd have to say that seems excessive. But if I'm getting product from overseas market at the moment and with shipping disruptions and so on, maybe 60 days is careful. Maybe I need 30 and I'm holding 60 days. When you have this, once you start sharing the days, it becomes more tangible for people in the business, and it takes a little while to get used to it. But that's a wonderful way to start thinking about, for my end customers, if I've got beverage drinks that don't have significant shelf life issue, then maybe having 30 days cover for my exports is good. Maybe 10 is okay, maybe 5 is okay, depending on how much capacity I have and how volatile demand is. But so once you see that for your business, you get a really good sense very quickly, a few cycles in the SOP process, and your business starts to understand what is good for them, and then you can start challenging that. And it's a very exciting evolution to see to go on with the customers.
Okay, right. Last time when you showed me on sales and operation planning meeting, in the software can do simulation when we change the plan, when we change order, or when we change quantity. We can saw some KPI that reflect customer satisfaction or reflect and financial dollar. How many is margin we have? How is work on that? That is, I think, is data driven in organization to show in sales and operation planning to better decision. We need more margin or we need to on time delivery to customer. How is work for that?
Yeah, and I don't think many software vendors are doing this yet. I still hear from our customers that we're quite unique, but for me it's obvious. The thing that most governs a whole business is if we annualize the dollars and we talk to that. So it's, forgive me, if we have a situation where a customer needs me to make a change and we have to crash a schedule, and if we can immediately show the planner, well, that's going to cost $2,000.
Right.
That immediately it invokes a different response from okay, Mr. Customer, right, I'll make that change. If I know I can make that change, but it's going to cost $2,000 and 3 other customers are going to be late, that will drive very, very different behaviors, but better behaviors than just showing the dollars. Right. So if we show all of the impacts, all of the significant impacts with every decision, you elevate everyone's thinking in the supply chain. And that's, for me, why it's so important that we do this. I think you're asking also, how do we do this? For me, it's most important. Accountants will disagree with me on this because they want to do all their budgeting in the tools. When we start showing this, I get very excited. But what, for me, it's most important is that the management team understand. And so I always use marginal costing. What I mean by marginal costing is, what is the impact of this change on its own? So if we're going to increase the stock carrying to increase our service level for a customer, that's saying, no, I want you to hold VMI for me, for example. I want to see what the annual cost of holding that stock is. Because if they're trying to squeeze me on price and they want me to cover, if they want me to hold a warehouse full of stock, I still don't know if that's a good idea or not. But if that's going to cost me another $350,000 a year, and to get that, I'm going to make $100,000 of profit, I don't want to do it. But now I can make the decision. So when we're in rough cut in our SOP process, we annualize those changes. If you've got a source material from India, not from China, for example, we want you to be able to see what is the cost, the fully weighted cost of that choice. And here's the kicker: it doesn't have to be right to the cent. If it's approximately right, if the cost is if it's $1 million of transport, if the cost difference looks to be $5,000 difference on $1 million, 0.005% or something, I don't really care if that's out by 1 or 2%, because I'm still going to make the right decision. So people get very, very upset about how can you possibly get that right? Well, we can't. It's planning, but we can get it approximately right. Like, I don't know what the US exchange rate is going to be tomorrow, but I know approximately what it's going to be tomorrow, and I can still make decisions based on that. So for us, it's really important that sharing the information that we have, just like when we forecasting the impact of your decisions is more important, and letting people understand it's an approximate answer is more important than not giving the information, because we can't get it 100% right. I can't get it to 3 decimal places. But it requires a maturity, because everyone who's using that information must understand it's a forecast of the impact. It's not a guarantee but like a forecast, it's the best information we've got today to make that decision. And I prefer to have the information, albeit it might have a small margin of error, than not have the information.
Right.
And I think, Tim, just to sort of jump in quickly, I think you're absolutely right. I've seen situations where, customers can and will demand that you hold inventory for them, even against promotions, right? Yeah. So I've seen this very often. I want to buy 1,000 cartons, but you hold 800 of them for me while I take 200, but I want those 800 at that promotional price, and you will hold the inventory for me. If you can work through that, it doesn't mean that you're actually holding 800 cartons in your warehouse. You may never manufacture those until just in time for these guys, because you can smooth it all out with future planning. And I think this is where people, and it's bad practice to try and, to kind of fall into being beaten up by your customers all the time. But when you're in a fight for your life, a brand versus brand in the market, and you cannot afford to annoy this customer because they will just simply go and sell more of something else, then these are the kind of things that you need to do if they're your big volume customers. It doesn't mean that you have to, you don't have to wear all of those costs if you can plan forward better. And I think this is the thing that people kind of lose sight of. They get caught up in the, we must do this, we've got to do this or we're going to lose the business. We've got to do this or we're going to lose market share. Yes, you're going to have to, you are going to have to do some things that you don't like, but it doesn't mean backing up inventory. It doesn't mean, going out and getting more warehousing space to hold it. It doesn't mean that you've got to do a lot more different than what you do today. What you do have to do is live up to the end of the bargain that you've made. But if you can plan for it better, you could, your costs do not have to go up by a lot in order to service those types of customers. Sorry, I interrupted there.
I love that example too, because that only happens once you've got a level of trust, or you've already got starting to break down the barriers and silos. If sales are making decisions, they'll do it in making sure that the stock is there. Not because that I'm not talking about everyone in sales, but it's just natural. It would be a natural response. Customers ask for it, so you give the customer what they want. If you include the planning and the general management or the CFO in this decision, then you'll co-develop these solutions, and for evermore, everyone involved in those decisions will see this as a valid option. That yes, we have to be able to service that demand, but we do not need to pre-commit to, as Andrew says, this a promotion that may just as likely not take 200 only and then never moves again, as it might take 20,000. And they negotiate 1,000. We just don't know, and you don't want to overcook or overcommit, but you have to be able to respond and support the customer if this one goes. So it's great, but that's a maturity in the business that already is starting to work together. So I only see that once you've got these soft processes, you always see that when you've got a soft process that's beyond supply chain and is using the executive suite are involved in. I've definitely worked in businesses that don't have soft processes that are thinking this way, but it's rare. But it's almost always once you get those people in a room regularly, they're working and looking at the same data and they understand it, then you start having constructive conversations about how we're going to do this because everyone's more aware of the challenges in the business and opportunities.
And you can then start to see where you can bend and stretch as well, right? Because people understand why they're bending and stretching. So there is nothing worse. Yeah, there's nothing worse than turning up to work on a Monday morning and you just know it's going to be a fight about your costs are too high, or we didn't meet this on time, or we didn't do this. The whole complexity thing is put into into context when it's a discussion, not when it's I told you this and this is what you're going to do at all costs. So I think that for me is the beauty of when you start pulling together all of these pieces of visibility. Everyone knows what they're working towards. It's like going to work on a Monday morning sometimes is like going into a tug of war. You've got people, and I always liken it to tug of war. You have a team on one end of the rope and another team on the other end of the rope. When it comes to running a business like this, you've actually got another team pulling that way and another team. So you've got 4 sets of ropes and everyone, it's just a mess. If you're all pushing in the same direction instead of pulling each other, then things become a lot better.
That's why I argue, Andrew, because it's when we have is everything in analog, everything in paper. I'm in sale. I have is a forecast demand in my assumption to customer. That is when something change. Maybe it's 3 day, 1 week. We know later. But now we have is a demand forecast in real time or near real time. We have planning and scheduling in real time. We have manufacturing production in real time. That's why everything change. Behavior of work will change because all data will be maybe in a minute. We will know the result. So when we know the result, that result will drive sales side, will drive production side. So what is a behavior change? How it work together? You can share because it's most of organization they have is a silo. They have their KPI. Right now it's all data you can see together. Then what they should change in their mindset or behavior of work will be adapt with the solution.
Yeah, it's an interesting. Whenever you deal with people, it's an interesting aspect because not everyone is the same.
Right.
But I think that whole idea of that silos idea is great so long as nothing changes. So and I haven't seen a business yet where something doesn't change on a daily basis. So for me, and I think this is where I used to love this when I worked at Unilever many years ago. They used to get people to move through departments, so you would actually have to go and spend 6 months on the shop floor, or you would go and spend 6 months up in accounting. And I always remember that the working in silos thing. I remember when I began in procurement. And I had the head of finance ring me one day and say, are you really going to spend across 8 different currencies? This is before the euro, so I'm showing my age. But are you really going to spend across these 8 currencies for all of these purchase orders that are in the system? And I said, oh, maybe. And it's like, well, it's we're trying to do some hedging. And I'm like, well, can you explain to me what hedging is? So, and if you don't know what the other person's problem is, you don't know how to help them to do it better. And, just simply doing things in a more refined process. So, I learned the fact that you don't raise purchase orders and leave them sitting there because someone in finance actually thinks you're going to spend that money. Even though you haven't delivered the purchase order to the customer, or to the supplier. So, I think for me, this is where businesses need to have that cross-fertilization. I think getting people into those areas, it's, you've got to walk a mile in someone else's shoes before you really know their problems. And that's, I remember a great colleague of mine in Australia coined the phrase when I was at PwC. It was basically put yourself in the other person's shoes. And if you can't imagine what it's like in their position, then you're in no place to make it as an informed decision.
Okay. Tim is what you suggest, because you implement both from demand side, supply side, or manufacturing side. What you suggest, or what your technique to do step by step to ensure the implement solution is success and satisfaction for employee each department?
Oh, excellent question. When I mentioned a few sessions ago that for me, one of the compelling things is having a really, or one of the first things we need is a goal. I like to have big financial goals, but there's a goal there that is tangible to everybody. So if our program is just improving the efficiency of the sequences on the shop floor, it would not be very exciting for sales. But if we have to have a goal that makes sense for everybody, and even though the whole goal, only a part of that goal may impact their part of the business, but that's the first thing. So there's got to be an indisputable need for change. I have experienced what Andrew's talked about, and been lucky enough to be in organisations where they've seeded people around the organisation, moved you between, and I absolutely hands down think it's the best experience I ever had as an employee. So I applaud that, and would applaud any company that does that. The SOP process gives us a mini way of doing that. And while you may not, particularly if you've got salespeople all over the world, it's not necessarily possible to have everyone in the SOP process. You can have their managers in the SOP process and have them doing demand reviews. And I actually like to get some of the supply chain people in the demand reviews for the same reason, so that everyone in the salespeople are getting to talk to somebody on supply side, so they can let their frustration know. If you can't get the wine that you're supposed to be selling over in China, or if it's the people in Puerto Rico are having trouble getting the materials and they can't sell, or the quality is bad or whatever, they've got a throat to choke, is the term Andrew likes to use. There's somebody there that they can eyeball and explain the frustration, and it's not there to beat somebody up, but that awareness that Andrew was alluding to is so important, and to remind that, to break down some of those silos and make sure that we know. The other parts of the project management about having good governance and having short, achievable milestones that are relevant to the team that's working at the time. We're a huge fan of agile project management, because I deeply believe that you co-develop better solutions than we could possibly do to you as a customer. We're much better to work with the customer and have something that between us, where our individual ideas become shared, and like I said, we'll end up evolving something that's better and works for the client. Client owns, and we learn along the way as well. And that works really well. But that, again, you have to have you keep the team small when you're doing that, and you make sure that the results are fast. And then it's really good to do that exactly like when you move people around in organizations. It's good to always have people in a team. We might be doing a program on improving the performance in a factory, or improving the shop floor reporting, shaping the dashboards or something that they're using for the ROE metrics. But to have somebody from sales or to have somebody from procurement that's not natively there, it's just an extraordinarily good for them to see that. It makes them aware. So while I don't flood the project with them, we normally try and have somebody from one of the other projects who's been on another project to be in there. It shares project management, but also shares the kind of the knowledge and awareness that we're part of a whole organisation, and it's an organisational change that we're making, an organisation-wide change. So for me, there's some of the cultural importance, and the other stuff that we focus on is technical, but it's always the cultural. That if we nail the culture, everything else will be fine. We can have a perfect technical solution if we haven't dealt with the cultural challenges and we haven't improved that situation, then even the best technical solution will fade and will under-deliver in the impact in the business. So for us, that's a really important part.
Right. Tim, can you show some success story for customer implement for manufacturing planning and control? What their success story and benefit that they have?
Yeah. So apologies, I don't have one here, so I'll just talk to it. There's a customer that we were working with, a very, very mature customer, because they had the planners who were there had already been recording how many mistakes they were making in planning, which is really uncommon, but a great metric. They were making on average 17 errors a month. Like I said, a very, very mature manager in that area to actually record this. And what a planning mistake was they were expecting to run something on a machine where they didn't have the tooling, or the skills that were needed on the crew were not going to be available, or there was inventory wasn't available. So they planned to make something, but they couldn't make it, and that was a planning miss. And they were having 17 planning misses. That's not the reason that they brought us in to work with them, and we worked with them. They already had a forecasting solution, so they worked with us on master scheduling and into sequencing. They had 5 planners, and they make closures, about 4 billion closures, like for putting on screw tip bottles or sports drinks and so on, and beer caps and so on. And they had a different planner who was working on Excel in each different area in the business. And so the first thing we did was we put in a master scheduling process, because they, again, were relying on MRP, and MRP was telling them to make stuff when they didn't have materials, and it didn't care. It just said, make it, you need it. So, and they would waste an enormous amount of time just trying to figure out if they could make stuff or not. And in fact, that was the first noise. And then they had 5 planners, because each of the different areas had their own planner, and they were dropping their MRP output into Excel, working through some 20,000 action messages in the MRP was spitting out for them, that kept 5 people permanently busy. So all they were doing was looking at action messages and not actually planning. And then they have to rush out a plan, which was ill-considered because they didn't have the right information. So we worked with them. We put in a master scheduling process so that they were only getting stuff that they could make. But the other side of that master scheduling coin was making sure that we were ordering the material that they needed to make the following plans, so the recovery plans. And then we put in our planning tool in each of the schedulers and on each of the scheduling sections, and we worked with them, and then we got down on the shop floor. It was a heavily unionized shop floor, but the guys realized that the business was distressed, and we were able to work with them to understand how to sequence the work to really optimize the machines. Because ultimately, even though it was an aggressively unionized factory, the operators liked the fact that if we scheduled well, they would have an easier day. So it ended up being okay. We were able to get good information from about how to sequence. And interestingly, the planners didn't know that, and they felt, because it was quite a unionized environment, they were worried about getting too involved in the shop floor, because they got a lot of aggression from the shop floor. So it was interesting to them to see us actually work with the shop floor and actually introduce what we call a high performance planning environment, where we started these short interval cycles where we'd issue a plan, and we'd issue it to the team leaders to talk to their crews about how they wanted the sequence to run to optimize everything. We'd give them 24 hours to review it, then we'd come back and we'd lock the plan in. And because we'd actually involved them, then we could hold them to task. They couldn't just change the plan when they wanted to. They had to stick to the plan. So we started getting schedule adherence. And by putting the sequencing tools in, we were able to go from 5 planners down to 2 planners immediately, because the work content was almost gone. Now, those planners were reabsorbed into other parts of the business, so lots of other areas to work on. But But immediately we went down to 2 planners, and the performance of the plan dramatically improved. Within 6 months, we're down to 1 planner, because 1 planner could do MPS and the e-planner and what people had done before, because they weren't trying to maintain spreadsheets anymore, and they weren't working in isolation. One person could see across the whole 4 billion units that were being produced, and the many, I think 40 or 50 machines. And we had these tight processes of issue the plan, get the shop floors buy-in, and then track them on a daily basis. So short interval schedule adherence tracking. And what we saw is the performance to plan went from about 35% up to 98, 99%, almost perfect. That's we were getting the jobs that we needed to get done in a week, we're getting done in a week. And it took longer, but we eventually got this jobs being run in sequence also. We started looking at, why are these jobs not being run in sequence? Why did you go to job 3, not job 2? Sometimes warehouse had issued the wrong materials, sometimes tooling wasn't available. But eventually we got to the bottom of all the different problems. Sometimes the team just wanted to do what they wanted to do. So we started holding them accountable to that. And we got control of the plan, and we got control of the plant. Yet with control of the plan, you got control of the plant. So the 2 then 1 people that were running the schedule were now able to cut plans that were followed, and they raised their delivery performance, went up from 92% to 98%. In fact, it went up to 99%. The target was 98%. We went up to 99%. And at the same time, we were able to reduce inventory by 30%. So we went from 5 planners to 2 planners to 1 planner. We went from 92% customer satisfaction to 98% customer satisfaction. Performance of plan and schedule adherence went through the roof. The low 30s up to high 90s. And our inventory dropped by 30%. The impact to their customers was so profound that their revenue over the next 12 months increased by another, I'll get the numbers wrong, but I think it's 25 or 30%. They got massively increased. And they could do it with the same factory and staff, because the machines were more capable. The union, even though it was still heavily unionized, we weren't fighting the unions. They were getting the plan and they were knocking it out, doing the work. And that factory was producing volumes that it had never done before. And meanwhile, the inventory stayed at the reduced rate. We're able to service that increased volume with no more inventory. So this was an evolution that, we saw almost immediate benefits, but all up, the business kept improving year upon year. So it was pretty exciting. And this wasn't a difficult scheduling task, but the profound difference was taking people out of fighting Excel, and all their attention was in Excel. So even with less people, we were able to get the attention on, why is my schedule not right? What can we do to improve the sequence for the factory? And how do we work with the factory to get them to follow the sequence? Once we got those, we could now start making sure that the material that we had would align to the sequence. You can't order the right material if the people in the shop floor are looking at the plan and saying, I don't want to run that, I'm just going to keep running what's on there. You will run out of material, you will have the wrong stuff in stock, and you won't know why, and it won't matter what you plan until you get control. So there was a lot of lessons that we learn over and over, but we see over and over again in businesses that think that that's okay because they've got someone in the corner planning and spreadsheets, but really they don't have the infrastructure and the maturity to be able to, and the processes to be able to issue a plan and make sure the factory is aligning to the plan. And there's a lot of that. It's easy to say, yeah, that's people stuff. But what happens with a good tool is it frees the planner, because they're not doing the clerical stuff. They've got time to start asking the deep questions of, why isn't the plan being followed? Or why was the plan not good enough to follow? And what do I need to do to make it right? And that means you've got to go out and check the warehouse before you issue the plan to make sure you've got the material. That's what you do until you get around to fixing why the warehouse is out. But once you've got time, because the tool is doing the planning for you, or doing the clerical part of the planning for you, then you can start worrying about, how do I make this plan an achievable plan? And that's something that people don't get, and businesses miss when their planners are out there trying to get the information out of SAP or their ERP system and trying to crunch it into something called a plan. They don't see these knock-on problems that are occurring because people are just focusing on their data and not looking at why. This plan should be like driving a business, right? And they're not focusing on that. But once we do, the impact is profound.
Right. That's good. Andrew, what we should do when we implement concept like this? do we need to coaching and mentor them maybe 6 months to ensure they sustain the system and they can learning from the system to run is more effective utilization the solution like better decision and faster decision with data driven organization.
Yeah, we kind of touched on this all through the series, right? An effective way of looking at this is looking at people's stress levels once they've done something. So, am I still at work at 9 o'clock at night, or am I, can I leave at a reasonable hour? The coaching piece in there is very important up front. People need to understand, and Tim used this phrase earlier, we're doing this with you, not to you. And I think that's where people need to understand it. And also it needs to be very clear from the business up front. Tim talked earlier about, and this is what scares people, right? Is if we do this better, then they're going to need less of us. And it's that whole robotics thing, they're coming to take our jobs. I think nothing could be further from the truth. There is, if you've got someone who's been struggling doing planning, not because they're not a good planner, but because you don't have the tools to do it with, the value of them when they get to do exactly what Tim said, start moving further down the business, up and down the value chain, to add value into the business is absolutely critical. So, from a learning point of view, do people really need to understand the heuristics that are going on in the background of some of these things? No. What they really need to do is be able to test it to death and have faith. So, you'll get a lot of skeptics who say, I can do this better in Excel. So, sometimes you're just going to have to put up with a lot more training, or not even training, a lot more convincing. And, that's why user acceptance testing is so important when you go through these things, because that's a little bit of coaching. That's coaching them through the fact that it can do the job. And you throw a scenario at it, and it will either do it or it won't. And if it doesn't, we'll figure out how to make it work. And to me, that's where people do not spend enough time is, I was reading an article earlier about, and I won't mention the software, but we took it down from 16 to 4 weeks. And I look at it and go, if the significant change that the business undergoes in 4 weeks is significant enough, it doesn't matter how good that software is. If people don't trust it and believe in it, then it's not going to go well. So, there are many instances where it has, but you just got to look at the statistics that tell you and it doesn't mean that you have to blow out timelines immensely. What you have to be able to do is be very clear and concise on where people's concerns are and how to address them. Make sure that they are trained and they are going to use it. So, talking about KPIs, if people are coming into a planning meeting with their laptop and a spreadsheet on it, you got to tell them to shut the laptop, or turn off the Excel and show me the system. Work this through in the system. Don't, give me statistics from the system. And I think this is where people just need to be, and to use your word, coached through it, that this is a friend, it's not a foe. Because quite often that's the way people view these implementations. I think the other big thing for me is I've seen it go too far one way and too far the other, but it kind of does need to be user led. Tim is going to share a great slide tomorrow with some other supply chain friends around not necessarily adoption, but adoption. Who will adopt better when you start talking about planning software? and it's generally people who are genuinely interested. Anyone who isn't interested in making a change, then you have a challenge. And but you can't be in control of those things all the time. But the more you put it in the hands of the users rather than IT, I think is always a good thing. Just you can over egg it a little bit too much at times, but that would be my thought on it.
Right. That's a good idea. I remember it's a 3S model of team. So for next episode next week, we will talk about financial perspective and project investment. What is a return of investment, the project, and benefit from each organization. Let me continue to talk next week again for whole process model project and what is benefit for that. That is okay? Right.
Perfect.
Look forward to.
Okay. Today, thank you so much for your time. And we will see next week again.
Thanks,
Pleasure.
Stephen.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Tim.